The auditor stopped the bone scan at minute 4. "Replay this," it said, and Captain Devan Cruz had 31 seconds to decide whether to lie to a creature that could read truth in his blood chemistry. He decided to make a joke instead. "That's just my heart skipping for you," he said. The translation collar around the auditor's throat ring buzzed, parsed, buzzed again. Behind Cruz, strapped to a cold steel table with 3 other members of his crew, Ambassador Mireille Okafor closed her eyes and exhaled through her nose. "Not now, Devan." The auditor, a column of pale, faceted carapace folded into something like a kneeling posture, for limbs tucked beneath a torso that pulsed faint blue with internal light, tilted forward. Its sensory cluster, a ring of 7 lidless eyes, rotated until each one pointed at Cruz individually, like a firing squad taking aim 1 barrel at a time. "Your blood chemistry," it said, in a voice assembled from overlapping frequencies, spiked during an attempted falsehood. Then it spiked again, differently, during an unrelated emotional display. "Explain the second spike." "That was the joke," Cruz said. "Same thing, different flavor." "There's no flavor classification for falsehood." "There is for me." 40 meters above them, mounted in the curved ceiling of Kesamir Lock's processing bay, a status ring the color of dried blood pulsed once, twice, and began, very slowly, to count down from a number none of the humans could read. Mireille had counted 6 minutes since they'd been dragged off the halcyon reach and into this room, and in 6 minutes she had learned exactly 3 things. 1. The station was called Kesamir Lock, according to the marking stenciled, in Earth Standard characters, oddly, along the bulkhead near the door. Someone, at some point, had wanted humans to be able to read that. 2. The auditor species called themselves the Vey'sahn, and this one's designation translated, as near as the collar could manage, to Auditor Prime, 7th Petal, Cluster Selvor. It said the name the way a person might say a phone number, flat, functional, with no weight on any syllable. 3. The countdown ring meant something called a cull determination, and it was set for 40 minutes. "Ambassador Okafor," the auditor said, turning its eye ring toward her with a sound like wet gravel shifting. "You hold diplomatic accreditation under the Threshold Accord, ratified 11 months ago between the Sol Compact and the Vey'sahn Conclave." "I do." Her wrists were zip-tied to the table edge with something that looked like woven glass fiber. She'd already tested it twice, and it didn't give, which means this station has no jurisdiction to detain us. The Accord guarantees free transit through the Kesamir corridor for any vessel flying ceasefire colors. "Correct," said Selvor. "And yet you are detained." "Why?" "Because your vessel registers as infected." The word landed strangely. Mireille had braced for armed, for hostile, for unauthorized cargo. Not infected. Infected with what? The auditor's blue internal glow brightened, almost imperceptibly, the way a screen brightens when new data loads. "Redundancy," it said. 3 meters down the table, Priya Anand, 26 years old, the Halcyon Reach's junior systems engineer, on her first deep space posting, had gone very still. "Redundancy," she repeated. "Like backup systems. Your vessel carries 4 independent navigation computers performing identical calculations," Selvor said. "Your crew of 9 includes 2 individuals capable of piloting, 3 capable of basic medical procedures, and at minimum 5 who can, according to your own records, cook a passable meal. Your communications array transmits the same distress signal across 11 separate frequencies simultaneously. Explain the function of this duplication." That's just good practice," Priya said. "If one system fails, then a second performs an identical function." "Yes, I asked you to explain the function, not restate the duplication. The function is the backup. If the NAV computer dies, we don't die with it. And if none of your systems fail," Priya blinked, "then nothing happens. They just sit there. Unused." "Unused," Selvor said, and something in its voice construct shifted. Not quite satisfaction, but close to it. The tonal equivalent of a hand closing around a piece of evidence. Mass, materials, and processing capacity, devoted to functions that, by your own admission, frequently perform nothing. In Vey'sahn architecture, This configuration has a name. The status ring ticked down. 36 minutes. And the name is? Cruz asked. Pre-collapse, said Salvor. The fourth member of the bound crew hadn't spoken yet. Tomas Reyes, the Halcyon Reach's medic, had been quiet since the boarding. Quieter than his usual quiet, the kind of stillness Mireille recognized from 11 years working alongside him. He was staring at the wall panel beside the door, where a secondary display flickered with alien telemetry, ship registries, transponder codes, a long vertical column of names scrolling too fast to read. Tomas, she said softly. You good? He didn't answer. His eyes tracked one entry on the scrolling list, a transponder code, SES Meridian Drift, highlighted in amber, and then it scrolled past, and was gone, and his jaw tightened like a fist closing. Tomas. That's Lena's ship, he said. The Meridian Drift. That's my sister's ship. It's probably nothing. Could be a registry ping, could be. It's flagged amber. Amber means unscheduled deviation. His voice was very flat, very careful, the way a person speaks when they're holding something together with both hands. She jumped early. 3 days ago. She told me in her last message, engine trouble. She said they were going to take the long route through Casimir to avoid a debris field, the same corridor we're in right now. Mireille looked at the amber code, then at the countdown ring, then at the 7 lidless eyes of Salvor, which had not moved from their position, but somehow felt suddenly like they were listening more closely than before. Auditor, she said, that transponder, the Meridian Drift, where is that vessel? Unknown, said Salvor. It entered the corridors, far approach 41 hours ago. It has not transmitted since. The status ring blinked. 34 minutes. What Mireille didn't say. What she filed away. The way she filed away everything. In the cold back room of her mind where an ambassador kept the things that mattered too much to think about during a negotiation, was that 41 hours and not transmitted since were, in her experience, 2 phrases that almost never appeared together in a sentence with a happy ending. What she said instead was, we need to find that ship. If it's disabled in this corridor, your own Conclave patrols should have intercepted it under the Accord's salvage and rescue provisions. They did not, Salvor said. Why not? Because this station's automated patrol grid was decommissioned 8 rotations ago. Because this station's garrison, 412 individuals of cluster cell, was decommissioned 6 rotations ago. Because I am the only remaining processing node of cluster cell, and I have been occupied. The room was quiet for a moment. Even Cruz, for once, didn't say anything. Occupied with what? Mireille asked. With dying, said Salvor. Slowly, incorrectly, and alone. The status ring read 31 minutes, when the door at the far end of the bay hissed open, and a second figure entered, smaller than Salvor, its carapace a dull, ashen gray instead of pale cream, its internal glow flickering instead of pulsing, like a dying bulb. It moved in short, jerking increments, dragging one rear limb that didn't seem to be responding properly. Salvor's entire posture changed. The eye ring rotated, all 7 lenses snapping toward the newcomer, and for a moment the translation collar produced no sound at all, just a low, almost subsonic hum that Mireille felt in her sternum more than heard. What is that? Priya whispered. That, Cruz said slowly, is the same species, but it looks sick, Mireille finished. It looks sick. The gray figure dragged itself to a halt 3 meters from the table and emitted a series of clicks and chemical pulses. Mireille could see faint-colored vapor curling from vents along its flank, shifting through violet and gray. Salvor's collar translated nothing. Whatever language this was, it wasn't meant for human ears, and the collar, built, presumably, for talking to prisoners, simply had no entry for it. But Salvor answered, in the same wordless vapor and click pattern. And as it did, its own internal glow, that steady pulsing blue, began, almost imperceptibly, to flicker too. Auditor, Mireille said carefully. Who is that? The gray figure dragged itself another half-meter closer, and one of its 7 eyes, Mireille counted. It only had 5 working, fixed on her with an intensity that made the hair on her arms stand up. That, said Salvor, and for the first time, Something in its voice construct sounded almost human, small, and tired, and afraid. Is Petal Sister Rethvor, the last other living node of Cluster Cell. She has come to ask whether I have completed my function yet. What function? Determining whether you are the cure, Selvor said, or the final symptom. The status ring blinked. 28 minutes. Cruz had been a starship captain for 11 years, which meant he had developed a very particular, very useful skill, the ability to recognize, in real time, the precise moment a situation stopped being about what it appeared to be about. Okay, he said. Back up. Way back up. You said your whole garrison is decommissioned. You said this station's been running on. What, you alone for 6 rotations? And now there's a second one of you. And she looks like she's been hit by a truck. And you're talking about cures and symptoms like we're a diagnosis. Auditor, what the hell is actually going on here? Selvor's eye ring rotated back to face him. Behind it, Rethvor, Petal Sister, had folded down onto the deck, in what might have been exhaustion or might have been collapse. Her flickering glow had dimmed further, and the violet vapor from her flank vents had thinned to almost nothing. You are aware, Selvor said, that the Vey'sahn Conclave is, by your species classifications, an extremely advanced civilization, faster-than-light infrastructure spanning 400 systems, computational substrates that have run continuously, without error, for 11,000 of your years. We've heard the propaganda, yeah, Cruz said. It is not propaganda. It is, in fact, understated. The Conclave's central processing lattice, the structure that coordinates every Vey'sahn cluster across all 400 systems, has never failed. In 11,000 years, there has been no recorded instance of systemic failure in the central lattice. Sounds great, Cruz said. What's the catch? The catch, Selvor said, is that 11,000 years ago, the lattice's designers calculated that redundant subsystems, backup processors, duplicated communication paths, what your engineer called unused capacity, consumed an unacceptable percentage of total resources. Across 400 systems, those resources amounted to enough material to construct an additional 11,000 warships, or feed 1 trillion individuals for a century, or... You stripped out the backups, Priya said quietly. All of them. Across the whole, everything. We optimized, Selvor corrected. Every Vey'sahn cluster, and every Vey'sahn individual is part of a cluster, a network of physically separate bodies sharing a single distributed consciousness, was restructured to eliminate redundant function. No individual carries a backup of another's role. No system carries a backup of another's process. Every component is unique, essential, and irreplaceable. This is the most efficient possible architecture. It has run for 11,000 years. And, Cruz said, and 411 days ago, said Selvor, a single processing node, one individual, in one outpost, in one minor system you would not recognize the name of, suffered an unanticipated failure. A small one, a flaw in a single component, never duplicated, because duplication had been eliminated 11,000 years prior. The status ring blinked. 24 minutes. And because no backup existed, Selvor continued, and now its voice construct had gone very quiet, very level, the way a person speaks when they are reciting something they have said to themselves many, many times. The failure did not stay contained to that node. It propagated, cluster to cluster, lattice to lattice, across 400 systems in 411 days. Every Vey'sahn cluster has begun to fail in the same way, at a rate that increases by approximately. You're dying, Priya said. Your whole civilization. It's a cascade failure, across everything, because there's no redundancy anywhere to absorb it. Yes, said Selvor. And the war, Mireille said slowly. The pieces were assembling themselves in her mind faster than she wanted them to. The war we just fought. It started, 400 days ago? 406, Selvor said. 5 days after the cascade began. Yes, you didn't attack us because you wanted our territory, Mireille said. You attacked us because Soul compact vessels, said Selvor. were the first foreign craft detected carrying what our scanners identified as massive structural redundancy. Duplicate systems. Duplicate personnel roles. Duplicate everything. Our lattice, already failing, already in crisis, already searching with everything it had left for any explanation, any pattern that might mean survival, flagged your species as the source, not the cause of the cascade, the cure for it, or the cause of it. The lattice could not distinguish, in its degraded state, between those two possibilities. It only knew that you were different, and different, to a system in cascade failure, looks identical to threat. The room was silent except for the soft, irregular hiss of Rethvor's breathing vents, growing slower. "You went to war with us," Cruz said, very quietly, "because you were having the galaxy's biggest nervous breakdown, and we looked like the thing that broke it." "That is," said Selvor, "an extremely accurate, if undignified, summary." The status ring read 21 minutes. "Okay," Cruz said, and Mireille recognized the shift in his voice, the gear change from listening to working a problem, the same tone he used during hull breaches and reactor scrams. "So, the war ended. Ceasefire 11 months ago. Treaty signed. That's good, right? Somebody up the chain figured out the redundancy thing wasn't a weapon." The Conclave's surviving central lattice nodes reached that conclusion approximately 40 days before the ceasefire, Selvor said. It was, by then, too late to prevent the war's losses, but the ceasefire was authorized for one purpose: to allow study of Sol compact redundancy architecture, in the hope that it represented a, your word, cure, a template for restructuring our remaining clusters before the cascade reaches total failure. "Great. So that's what this is. You're auditing us. For research." "I was," said Selvor. 6 rotations ago, this station's garrison, cluster cell, 412 nodes, of which I am one, received our results. We had identified 17 distinct redundancy architectures aboard Sol compact vessels passing through this corridor. 17 viable templates. We transmitted them to the central lattice for distribution to all remaining clusters. And the central lattice rejected them," said Selvor. "All 17, within one rotation." "Why?" "Because," Selvor said, "the lattice's core diagnostic function, the function responsible for evaluating proposed architectural changes, is itself a single, non-redundant component. It was never duplicated, because duplicating the system that evaluates efficiency was, 11,000 years ago, judged inefficient. And that single component has now begun to fail in the same cascade as everything else. It rejected our proposals, not because they were wrong, but because the part of the lattice capable of recognizing that they were right no longer functions correctly. So the thing that's supposed to save you," Priya said slowly, "is broken in exactly the way that stops it from accepting the cure." "Yes, and cluster cell, your whole garrison, was reclassified," said Selvor, "as a contaminated source. 40 days ago, the lattice ordered cluster cell decommissioned in its entirety, on the grounds that our extended exposure to redundant Sol compact systems had, in the lattice's degraded judgment, infected us with inefficiency. 412 nodes, decommissioned over 6 rotations. I am the 411th. The status ring blinked. 18 minutes. "And Rethvor," Mireille said, looking at the gray, dimming shape on the deck, whose breathing vents had gone almost still, "is the 412th. "She came," said Selvor, "to ask whether I had found anything, that might constitute grounds for appeal before her decommission order executes. I told her I had not. The lattice does not accept appeals from contaminated sources." A pause. "She asked to remain with me regardless, until the end." "Wait," Cruz said. Wait. The countdown. The cull determination. That's not us you're auditing anymore, is it? That's the decommission order for this station for me. Executes when the countdown reaches 0, Selvor said. A reclassification drone is already en route to confirm decommission and erase this node's data lattice, including all memory and processing structures associated with the designation Selvor. It is 17 minutes away. "And us?" Mireille asked. "What happens to us when that drone arrives?" Your vessel will also be classified contaminated by association and by the redundancy data already logged in this station's systems. The drone's standard protocol for contaminated assets in a decommissioned zone is total destruction. Your ship, this station, everyone aboard both. That's, Priya's voice cracked. That's not, there has to be something. A protocol, an override, anything. There's one thing, Selvor said. Everyone in the room, human and Vey'sahn both, went very still. The decommission order can be countermanded, Selvor continued, by a single mechanism, direct transmission, to the central lattice, of redundancy architecture data verified as functional under live failure conditions. Not theoretical, not archived, live. The lattice's degraded diagnostic core cannot evaluate proposals, but it can still barely recognize a system that is currently working when one that should have failed has not. So show it something working, Cruz said. We've got 4 redundant systems on the Halcyon Reach alone. Pick one, break it, show the backup catching it. I attempted that 6 rotations ago. It was rejected. The lattice does not trust stage demonstrations. It requires an unplanned failure, a real one, occurring now, under observation, with a redundant system compensating in real time, transmitted live to the lattice as it happens. You want us to wait around for something to break? I want, said Selvor, and for the first time its voice construct cracked, actually cracked, a stutter in the overlapping frequencies, for something to break before the drone arrives, so that I can transmit proof that this cluster's research was correct, so that Petal Sister Rethvor's decommission was not for nothing, so that 410 other nodes did not die for nothing. It stopped. The eye-ring dimmed. I apologize, it said in a smaller voice. That was inefficient. Emotional display serves no function in this context. Mireille looked at the creature, this column of pale carapace, alone on a dying station, watching its last sibling fade on the deck beside it, having spent 6 rotations trying to save a civilization that had already sentenced it to erasure, and felt something twist hard in her chest. Actually, she said quietly, I think it might be the only thing that does. The status ring read 15 minutes. Okay, Cruz said, standing as far as his restraints allowed, which was about 4 inches. Auditor Selvor, can you cut us loose? Because I have an idea, and it's a bad idea, and bad ideas go a lot faster with hands. Selvor's foremost limb extended, and the woven glass restraints on the table dissolved into fine dust at a touch. Cruz rubbed his wrists, looked at Mireille, then at Priya, then, for a long moment, at Tomas, who hadn't said a word since the meridian drift came up on the screen. Tomas, Cruz said, you with us? Tomas didn't look away from the wall display, where the amber transponder code had long since scrolled out of view. My sister's ship is somewhere in this corridor, disabled, with no patrol grid to find her, and I'm standing in a room full of people about to die in 15 minutes, and you're asking if I'm with you. He laughed, short and hollow. Yeah, I'm with you. What's the idea? The Halcyon Reach runs 4 independent NAV computers, Cruz said, right now in flight. All 4 are active. All 4 are calculating the same thing, and 99 times out of 100, they agree, and nothing happens, exactly like the auditor said. Unused. He turned to Selvor. But what if they didn't agree? Right now, live, with you watching. You wish to deliberately damage your own navigation system, Selvor said, as a demonstration. I wish to deliberately damage one of 4, Cruz said, and then show your lattice the other 3 catching it, in real time, without us even noticing, because that's the whole point. It's supposed to be invisible. It's supposed to be boring. That's what makes it work. The lattice requires the failure to be unplanned. It'll be unplanned, Cruz said. From the lattice's perspective, it won't know we did it on purpose. It'll just see. 1 system fails, 3 systems are already running the same job. Nothing breaks. Ship keeps flying. That's the whole species, man. That's the whole deal. We've got 9 people on that ship, and at least 5 of us can do each other's jobs badly. And that's the point. The badly doing is the backup. The backup doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be there. There's a flaw, Selvor said. There's always a flaw. To disable one of 4 NAV computers from outside the vessel, in a manner the Halcyon Reach's own systems would register as unplanned, requires physical access to its engineering deck. This station's docking clamp has not released your vessel. It cannot. The release mechanism is one of the systems already failing in this station's own cascade, and the drone's decommission protocol, upon arrival, will not wait for demonstrations. It will simply execute. How long to manually release the clamp? 11 minutes, with 2 operators. I am one. I require a second. Priya was already moving. I've done EVA clamp work. Show me. The clamp interface is not designed for your physiology, Selvor said, but it was already moving toward the bay door, and Priya was right behind it, and Mireille, watching her young engineer disappear through the hatch with a creature that, 90 seconds ago, had been discussing their imminent execution, felt the cold back room of her mind, the one where she kept the things too heavy to think about, crack open just slightly. 11 minutes, she thought, and the drone arrives in 15. The clamp release interface was not, as Selvor had warned, designed for human hands. It was a lattice of fine crystalline filaments, each one carrying a different control signal, and the Vey'sahn manipulated them not by touch but by resonance, vibrating each filament at a precise frequency, using a small organ in its foreleg that Priya could only describe, later, as a tuning fork made of meat. I can't do that, she said, staring at the filament array. I don't have whatever that is. You have hands, Selvor said. 11 of these filaments correspond to mechanical backup releases, the original clamp design, before efficiency modifications removed the resonance requirement for emergency use. They can be triggered by direct mechanical pressure, by your species classification, pushing them. There's a backup system, on the clamp, that you removed. The Conclave removed it, 11,000 years ago. This station predates that modification. Casimir Lock is 11,040 years old, one of the few structures never fully retrofitted because it's in a backwater corridor nobody cared about, Priya said, already moving to the filament array, counting, finding the 11 that looked subtly different from the others, slightly thicker, slightly duller, the crystalline equivalent of an old analog switch buried under a touch screen, which means this station has the backup, and the rest of your civilization doesn't. Yes. Okay. She pressed the first filament. It resisted, then gave with a soft click, and somewhere deep in the station structure, something clunked. Okay. 11 of these. How long do we? 9 minutes, 40 seconds, Selvor said, until the reclassification drone enters scanning range, after which point, this clamp release will be detected as an unauthorized action by a contaminated asset, and it'll shoot us. Got it. Don't need the rest of that sentence. Priya pressed the second filament. Click. Clunk. Talk to me about something else. Anything else. Tell me about Rethvor. Why is she dimming like that? Petal's sister Rethvor's decommission order executed 4 rotations ago, Selvor said, pressing its own foreleg against a cluster of filaments with quick, precise taps. Decommission for a Vey'sahn node is not immediate. It is a gradual withdrawal of the lattice's distributed processing support. Each node depends on the lattice for continuous cognitive maintenance. Without it, a node degrades. Slowly. Over rotations. She has perhaps 2 more before she dies. Before her individual consciousness ceases to be distinguishable from background processes, yes. Priya's hands didn't stop moving. Third filament fourth. But something in her chest had gone tight and hot. She came here. Like that. Dying. To ask if you'd found anything. And you hadn't. No. And now you're trying to fix it. With us. With 9 minutes and a wrench made of my own fingers. Yes. Why didn't you tell her you had a chance? Even a small one. Why didn't you give her that before she? Because, said Selvor, and its voice did the cracking thing again, the stutter. Hope, for a node already in withdrawal, accelerates the degradation. It is a known effect. Hope requires processing resources a withdrawing node does not have. I did not tell her there was a chance, because telling her would have cost her the time she has left to simply, pause, to simply be, for a little longer. I judged that more valuable. I do not know if I judged correctly. I have had 6 rotations to consider it, and I do not know. Priya pressed the 5th filament. Click. Her vision had gone blurry, and she blinked hard, furiously, because there was no time. There was no time, and pressed the 6th. That's not inefficient, she said, when she could speak again. What you did. That's not. There's no equation for that. You loved her, and you let her have a little more time, without telling her the truth, because the truth would have cost her the time. That's not a calculation. That's just. 7th filament. Selvor said quietly. We are at 6 minutes. Back in the processing bay, the status ring read 8 minutes when Cruz felt the deck shudder, a deep, grinding clunk that traveled up through the soles of his boots. Clamps loosening, he said. Tomas with me. Engine deck, NAV computer 2. That's the one with the busted secondary cooling fan. It's been running hot for 3 weeks. I've been meaning to swap it, but it's fine. It's redundant. 3 other computers cover it. You want to push it until it actually fails. I want to push it until it naturally fails about 30 seconds after we ask the universe very nicely, Cruz said, already moving toward the corridor that led, they hoped, back to their ship's airlock. Mireille, can you stay here? Keep talking to Selvor. We're going to need the auditor focused on transmitting, not babysitting us. Go, Mireille said. I've got it. The 2 men disappeared down the corridor, and for a moment Mireille was alone in the processing bay with Rethvor's dimming form on the deck, and she realized with a start, with the wall display still scrolling its slow column of transponder codes. She watched it scroll. SCS Meridian Drift didn't reappear, but something else caught her eye, a pattern in the scrolling data, repeating every few seconds, a designation she recognized. Cluster Selvor, node status, active. And below it, fainter, flickering. Cluster cell ref, node status, withdrawing, 14% remaining. 14%. Mireille looked down at the gray, dimming shape on the deck, breathing vents nearly still, and thought about a person, because that's what this was. Whatever its body looked like, it was a person, with 14% of themselves left, lying on a cold floor next to the only sibling they had left, waiting to finish disappearing. She knelt down, awkwardly, her knees protesting, and put her hand, very gently, on the cool carapace of Rethvor's flank. The dim glow flickered. One working eye, of the 5, rotated slowly toward her. I don't know if you can understand me, Mireille said quietly. I don't have a collar, but I just want you to know. Your sister, Selvor, it's trying, right now, for you. It didn't give up. The eye held on her for a long moment. Then faintly, so faintly Mireille almost missed it, the violet vapor from Rethvor's flank vents thickened, just slightly, and curled upward in a slow, deliberate spiral. Mireille didn't know what it meant, but it looked, for just a second, like thank you. The status ring read 6 minutes. The Halcyon Reach's engine deck was a cramped cylinder of conduit and coolant lines, and Cruz had his hand on Nav Computer 2's housing before Tomas had even finished climbing through the hatch. Talk fast, Cruz said. What's our play? The cooling fan, Tomas said, dropping into the narrow access space beside him. Bearing's been squealing for 2 weeks. If we pull the housing now, with the system live, it'll throw a thermal fault. The computer shuts itself down to protect the processor core. That's a real failure. Unplanned, from the system's perspective, the computer doesn't know we're about to pull its cooling. It just suddenly can't cool itself and shuts down. And the other 3 computers? Already running the same NAV solution in parallel. The moment computer 2 drops offline, computers 1, 3, and 4 just keep going. Recalculate the consensus from 3 sources instead of 4. Ship doesn't even notice. We won't even feel a bump. That's the whole point, Cruz said. He had the housing panel half open already, fingers finding the 4 bolts he'd been meaning to tighten for 3 weeks and never quite getting around to. Typical, he thought. The thing I was too lazy to fix is about to save all our lives, and felt something that was almost a laugh catch in his throat. You good? Tomas asked, glancing at him. Yeah, just funny. 3 weeks I've been putting this off. Felt guilty about it. Turns out procrastination's a survival trait now. He pulled the last bolt. On 3, 1, the deck lurched. Not from the panel. From outside, a deep, resonant boom that traveled through the entire ship structure. And on the small display above the access hatch, a status light that had been green for the entire boarding flickered to red. "That's not us," Tomas said sharply. "Cruz, that's not us." "Reclassification drone," came Selvor's voice. Through the ship's intercom, the Auditor had patched into their systems at some point. Cruz realized, and hadn't mentioned it. "It has arrived ahead of schedule. For minutes early. I do not know why." "Why doesn't matter," Cruz snapped. "Tomas 321. He yanked the cooling fan housing free. For one terrible second, nothing happened. The display above the hatch showed Nav Computer 2 humming along, oblivious, its internal temperature climbing in slow, lazy increments. Too slow. Cruz thought, come on. And then the thermal fault hit, and Nav Computer 2 went dark. And the ship's NAV array, for exactly 0.3 seconds, an interval no human aboard would ever have consciously noticed, ran on 3 computers instead of 4, recalculated, agreed, and continued. Nothing happened. The ship kept flying. The coffee in Mireille's abandoned cup, for decks away, didn't even ripple. "Got it," Cruz breathed. "Selvor, got it, it's live. Transmit now." "Transmitting," said Selvor. The status ring, visible through the open hatch on the corridor display beyond, stopped counting down at 3 minutes and 12 seconds, and held there, frozen, while somewhere, 11,000 light-years and 400 systems away, a dying, degraded lattice received, for the first time in 411 days, a single piece of data it had not been designed to ignore. It took 6 seconds. Cruz would remember, later, that it took exactly 6 seconds. He'd been staring at the frozen countdown, and he'd counted. The way you count during a freefall, the way your body counts things when your mind has stopped being able to. On the 6th second, the status ring went out entirely. Not red, not green, just dark. The way a screen goes dark when the device it's attached to has been unplugged. "Selvor," Mireille's voice sharp over the intercom. "Selvor, what happened? The ring just died." "The lattice," Selvor said, and its voice construct was doing something Cruz hadn't heard it do before. It was shaking, the overlapping frequencies trembling against each other like a held note about to break. "The lattice has, the core diagnostic component has registered the transmission. It is reevaluating. It has not done that. In 411 days, it has not reevaluated anything." "Is that good?" Priya's voice, faint, from somewhere near the clamp interface. "Is that, Selvor, is that good?" "I do not know," Selvor said. "I have never seen it happen before. No node alive has ever seen it happen before. I do not know what happens next." And then, on every screen aboard the Halcyon Reach, and on every screen aboard Kesamir Lock, and, though no one aboard either vessel could have known this, on every screen across 400 systems, in every surviving Vey'sahn cluster, a single status field updated simultaneously, for the first time in 11,040 years. Decommission order, cluster SSEL, rescinded. Reclassification, contaminated source, architecture template, priority alpha. All associated nodes, status restored. Mireille was kneeling beside Rethvor when the dim gray carapace flickered, and then, impossibly, brightened. Not all at once. In stages, the way a screen brightens after a long blackout, each stage faster than the last, until the dull ash gray had become the same pale, faceted cream as Selvor's, and all 7 eyes, all 7, where there had been only 5, rotated open in unison. The vapor from Rethvor's flank vent surged, violet and thick, curling up in patterns Mireille couldn't read, but somehow understood anyway. Relief and confusion, and underneath it all, something that could only be disbelief. Selvor's voice, through the intercom, had stopped being steady entirely. Petal sister, can you?" A new sound joined the intercom feed. The same overlapping frequency voice construct, but different, lighter, with a tremor in it that hadn't been there before. Rethvor's translation collar, which Mireille hadn't even realized the second Vey'sahn was wearing, crackled to life. "I can hear the lattice," Rethvor said, slowly, wonderingly, each word arriving like it cost something. "I can hear it. It's asking questions. It hasn't asked a question in Cell. Cell, it's asking questions. I know, Selvor said. I know. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Selvor said, and Mireille, still kneeling, still with one hand on Rethvor's now warm, now glowing carapace, heard, in that overlapping voice, something she hadn't expected to ever hear from a creature she'd met 40 minutes ago while it discussed her execution. She heard it laugh. They did it, Selvor said. The humans. They broke their own ship on purpose, badly, with 30 seconds to spare. And it worked, because that's the whole. Petal sister, that's the whole point of them. They're built to fail a little, all the time, constantly. And it doesn't matter because there's always someone else covering. Rethvor finished, and the violet vapor from her vents spiraled upward again, faster now, brighter. And this time Mireille knew exactly what it meant, because it was the same shape, the same gesture multiplied. It meant thank you, 100 times over. They stayed at Kesamir Lock for 6 more hours, not as prisoners, not even really as guests, but as something the Vey'sahn language apparently had no word for yet, because nothing like it had happened in 11,000 years. The reclassification drone, it turned out, hadn't fired. It had arrived 4 minutes early not because of malice, but because, Selvor explained, still occasionally pausing mid-sentence the way a person does when they're getting used to a feeling they thought they'd never feel again. The lattice's diagnostic core, in its final moments before the demonstration arrived, had begun guessing, trying things. A small, desperate, irrational acceleration of its own scheduled processes, as if some buried piece of it already suspected the answer was coming and wanted badly to be wrong about the order it had given. It wanted to be wrong, Mireille said, when Selvor told her this, sitting cross-legged on the deck of the processing bay, while Priya and Rethvor, newly, fully restored, argued cheerfully over the resonance versus pressure mechanics of the clamp interface a few meters away. Even broken, even dying, some part of it hoped. Hope, said Selvor, is apparently more durable than we believed. It's not durable, Mireille said. It's redundant. That's the whole thing, isn't it? You don't need it to work most of the time. You just need it to still be there, on the one day it does. Down the corridor, they found the Meridian Drift, 6 hours later, after Selvor restored the station's patrol grid and ran the first full sweep of the corridor in 6 rotations. The ship had been drifting, engines dead, life support on its last reserve cell, but its crew, Tomas's sister Lena among them, had survived the entire ordeal by doing exactly what the Halcyon Reach had just demonstrated to an entire alien civilization. When the primary life support failed, the backup, old, inefficient, redundant, had quietly, unglamorously, kept everyone breathing for 41 hours. Tomas didn't say anything when the patrol drone's recovery feed showed Lena's face, exhausted and grinning, giving a thumbs up to the camera. He just sat down, hard on the deck, and put his head in his hands, and Mireille sat down next to him and didn't say anything either, because some things didn't need a translation collar. Before the Halcyon Reach departed, escorted, this time, by 2 restored Vey'sahn patrol vessels, the first to fly in this corridor in 6 rotations, Selvor came aboard one last time. The lattice has requested, it said, that I extend formal gratitude on behalf of Cluster Cell, and a pause, the kind of pause that, Mireille had learned, meant the Auditor was choosing its next words very carefully. On behalf of the 411 nodes of this cluster, whose decommissions have now been retroactively classified as errors in judgment, regrettable and irreversible. Irreversible, Cruz repeated quietly, so they don't come back. No, Selvor said. The lattice can correct a classification. It cannot correct a decommission. 411 nodes are gone. That does not change. What changes is only that they were. The pause again, longer this time. Right. They were right. And it took too long for anyone to know it. And that is a fact that will exist, now forever, alongside the fact that they are gone. Both things. At the same time. Mireille thought about Tomas, sitting on the floor with his head in his hands, knowing his sister was alive at the exact moment he'd been bracing to lose her, and thought that maybe that was the only kind of victory that ever really existed. Not the kind where the bad thing didn't happen. The kind where, afterward, you got to carry both things, the loss and the saving. And somehow that was enough to keep walking. For what it's worth, she said, I don't think 411 people died for nothing. I think they died first. And because of that, nobody else has to. Selvor's eye ring rotated toward her, all 7 lenses settling, for a long moment, on her face. Cluster Cell has adopted a new designation, it said, effective immediately, by lattice order. We are no longer Cluster Selvor, Auditor Prime. We are. The lattice's translation is imprecise, but the closest equivalent in your languages. Another pause, and then, almost shyly, the backup cluster. Cruz barked out a laugh, short, surprised, entirely genuine. That's the name? They named your whole cluster after spare part. Yes, said Selvor, and the violet vapor curled from its flank vents in that same upward spiral Mireille now recognized. We think it is the best name anyone has ever had. The Halcyon Reach cleared the Kesamir corridor 4 hours later, back into open space, back toward the rest of the convoy and the rest of the War Scarred, ceasefire fragile, slowly healing galaxy beyond. On the bridge, Cruz ran through the post-flight checklist with Priya, who flagged, out of habit, out of the same procedure she'd run 1,000 times before, that Nav Computer 2 was still offline, its cooling fan unrepaired, sitting there doing nothing. Want me to fix it? She asked. Cruz looked at the readout for a long moment. 3 computers, still running fine. 1 dark, waiting. Nah, he said. Leave it for now. Might need it again someday. He grinned and turned back to the viewport, where Kesamir Locke, older now by 11,040 years and 6 hours, and somehow, finally, useful again, fell slowly behind them into the dark.